Hi, I'm Tyson Franklin, and welcome to this week's episode of the Podiatry Legends podcast. The podcast designed to help you feel, see, and think differently about the podiatry profession. This week is part 2 of a group perspective on good, bad, and difficult patients. And on this particular episode, I have 4 more guests. Now, hopefully you listened to part 1 last week. If you haven't, that's fine. You can go back to it and listen to it afterwards. But on this week's episode, I have Jonathan Small, followed by Richard Chasen, followed by Liam McManus, and then the last person is Bronwyn Cooper. In between each interview, there'll be a quick little noise. That's how you know it's switching over to the next speaker. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this group perspective on good, bad, and difficult patients. And with me now is a man who needs no introduction. He has been on the podcast 10 times. It's almost his show. It is Jonathan Small. How you doing, Jonathan?
Hi, Tyson. Great to be on again. It's been quite a while, actually.
I was having a look before, and it was May 2023 since you were on last. So
Just
by the time this
over
episode,
to Australia.
yeah, so by the time this episode comes out, it'll be almost a year. So people may have thought we had a falling out. We're not talking anymore.
After my visit.
Okay, so let's dive into this subject. Good, bad, and difficult patients. There's been I've had a few people on so far, a lot of different opinions and thoughts on it, which is fantastic, which is exactly what I was after. So give us your rundown on your thoughts around this particular subject.
Yeah, so I think that there are different people who come into our lives at different levels. And that can be patients, or it can be family, or it can be friends or enemies. And they interact with us at different levels. And they'll interact with us in good ways or bad ways or difficult ways. And some of that might be as a result of our behavior, but very often it's as a result of their behavior. And in a lot of cases, we'll gel with people, we'll get on well with them, we'll be happy in their presence, and we'll have very similar values, outlook on life, and just engaging in each other's company in a really positive way. You and I are an example of that, Tyson. You know, we came over to visit you, and we didn't know that Evan and my son and Christine, your wife, were going to get on like a house on fire. They could have not got on well at all.
Yeah.
But actually get on really well, and that was a good relationship that was built in a very short space of time. And we do that all the time with our patients. We build these good relationships with them. But sometimes it doesn't go that way. It doesn't go that way with people that we meet all the time. Sometimes it can turn into a bad relationship, either as a result of an action that we do, or a moral that we have, or a value that we have, or an attitude that we have, or equally from their perspective as well. And that's when relationships can go south and they can become bad patients or even into difficult patients. And I've seen this throughout my career as an independent practice in podiatry, where patients can move between these tiers. We talk about 4 tiers in my book and on Work Smarter, Not Harder, but dealing with your 3 tiers you've mentioned about good, bad, and difficult.
Yeah.
And I can think of examples of each one. So your good patients. So for instance, I've got a patient who's coming in this week, and she's been with me for past 2-3 decades, but she suddenly developed ill health. And her son called up the other day and said, look, she's having to move into a care home with us near me, but so she won't be coming to see you anymore because she's moving away from the area. But we'd like to bring her for one last time as a final goodbye for this and a thank you for the service you've given her over all the years. That's a good patient. She's known about Evan growing up, always happy to see her, very engaged. I knew her. I looked after her husband before he died. These are good relationships, and the real granite within your practice. You're happy to see them, and they make you happy. And lots of patients along those lines, ones that you'll have a good laugh with, ones that you'll share sadness with, go through difficult times, go through good times with, and they really value you as a person, and they respect you, and you're much more than just their podiatrist. You're the counsellor, you're the friend, you're the supporter for them. And equally, they're supportive to you. So when you hit difficult times, you get that reciprocation. And they make good decisions about their health. Don't put you in a difficult position as a podiatrist. So you can help to get them to be the best with their feet that they can be. They'll invest in their health. They'll follow your advice on care. And they really are the cream of the crop for patients for you. They just make life and work so enjoyable, and you get the rewards from that of helping them. They get the rewards of you helping them as well, and it just makes the workday so much better when you fill your practice full of those good patients.
I totally
On the
agree.
flip side,
Yeah.
we get We get bad patients coming in. We get patients who maybe are, having a bad day, maybe an argument with their spouse before they've come in. They decide to take it out on you, or the car's broken down. They're frustrated. They're not bad people. They're just not coming to you in the same frame of mind as the good patient may do.
And they could just be having a bad day. Yeah, because I always say
Exactly.
one bad visit doesn't sum up a bad patient, but if they're doing it multiple times,
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
yeah,
And also, you can't get on with everybody all the time. There are people that aren't going to get on with me, and I'm not going to get on with them. And there's no point flogging a dead horse trying to force that relationship. It's far better to see the relationship for what it is and go, you know what, that isn't the relationship for either of us. So let's move on from it. Let's not make it an awkward situation. Let's just let each other go from our lives. And that can be for all sorts of ways, all sorts of reasons. One of the filters I try and put in is those patients who try to devalue you as to the job you do and the work that you do for them and the results you achieve for them. That they'll happily spend more on their hair or on their beauty than actually on their feet, that enables them to get to their hairdressers or to their beauty appointment or do the activities that make them feel happy and fulfilled and in love with their life. And they'll very happily project onto you their own thoughts on your value as a human being. And I don't gel well with those people because I don't think
no,
that's a right thing to be doing to somebody else.
no. And that's one of the things when people join the Podiatry Business Owners Club on Facebook, I ask them, yeah, what's their biggest frustration in podiatry? That's one of the entry questions. And one of the most common things is I feel disrespected by my patients, and that frustrates me, or just disrespected in the community. And I thought it was really interesting because my whole career, I could count on one hand the amount of times I actually felt disrespected by a patient. They were few and far between. But some people, it seems to be happening a lot. And I think it's because they let those people into their business that are disrespectful, who attract more disrespectful patients.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you've got to try and have the filters in place that prevent this from happening for you.
Yeah.
And of course, you've also got that thing that it takes 5 positive interactions to offset 1 negative interaction. So you need to fill your patients full of good patients to offset those bad patients who may come in. And that respect thing is really important, because I come from a place where my default is to respect everybody. My default is to give care, give love, give empathy, give support to everybody, whoever they are, strangers or people that I know. It makes no difference
Yeah.
until they disrespect me. Okay. And then that changes equilibrium. It does, and they'll never get back to the relationship where I was giving everything of myself to them. I'll just put up a barrier and I'll go, you're not getting as much from me anymore as you would have if you hadn't disrespected me. And that disrespect can come in so many guises. That can be a negative review. It can be being rude to the staff. It can be a blame game, even though we've run through the expectations with them, and yet we're the ones at fault because we haven't sorted their problem out, even though they're carrying on wearing their court shoes, for instance, and it's our fault. So I think people who are genuinely respectful won't become bad patients. I think they'll just stay as good patients. I think it's the ones who feel they've got permission to just suddenly be abusive, if you like, towards the person who's giving all this care to them and trying to help them with their problems. And that generates a bad relationship, and you're far better off letting those bad relationships go.
I think that's really important, the whole respect side of things too, because I would never be rude or disrespectful to anybody. It's not in my nature to do that. Now, can I be nasty to someone if they're nasty to me? Oh, yeah, I can. You know me. And yeah, I can get fired up really fast. But I'm the same as you. My first initial meeting with somebody is always respectful.
Yeah.
At no stage, I don't care what the person does, I would never talk down to them in any way, because it's just not in me to do that. But I think some people are that way. They do have this tier of where they see themselves in society.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I've only once actually refused to care for a patient, and it was a home visit patient. I'd bent over backwards for them. I was going to visit them at 8 o'clock at night for an urgent problem. And I walked through the door and they had an absolute go at me. Yeah. And I just went, I don't have to take this. I don't have to be here now. I'm here to help you. I'm going, sorry. Yeah. And because I've got to protect my own space for my own mental health. Yeah. I'm not there to be bullied, abused by members of the public when I'm trying to do my best for them. And as you say, if they're just not on the same hymn sheet as you, then you're better off just accepting that it's not going to become a good relationship and just let them go to somebody else. I know that I've had any difficult patients, and I think I've had the odd difficult patient, the one that comes in with a preconceived idea about their issue, their foot problem, and they won't change their preconceived idea no matter what evidence you show them, no matter how you engage with them, no matter if their family's there supporting what you're saying and they're just being stubborn. They can be difficult to cajole round into and maybe a better understanding of their condition. But the ones that I find the most difficult of all is when it's the patient's relatives who don't engage with you, but more often than not might pick up the bill for the care that you've given.
Yeah.
Okay. And I find myself in the middle of a marital between husband and wife, but the wife's spending the husband's money. Yeah. And for some reason, I'm caught up in the middle of that. I had it the other day between a parent and a son and his parent. Son 19 years old enough to make his own decisions financially, but the parents decide to have a go about the cost of the care that he's had. It was the son's decision to take that care. He could have said no. He could have turned around to his mom and said, "Should I pay that much for it?" It's, that, and I end up in the middle of that, and I find that a really difficult situation because those people have.
But do you learn something from that? Because that was one of my things about whenever I had what I classed as a difficult patient was almost like, it was like a learning opportunity. You would learn something that you could probably then apply to another patient down the track.
Yeah, so over the years, what it means is I've written a lot more information around our costings so that people can see up front that they actually are meant to read the new patient letter, and they signed acceptance that they've read the new patient letter and the details on our fees. It's all been built in that wasn't there many years ago, but is now. A lot of my blogs are about the costs of care and all those things, but you still can't, if there's somebody who hasn't engaged in your whole process, the patient journey, to then be critical of the patient journey when they've had no interaction with it other than the bill at the end point. I find that a difficult situation to manage because they're a stranger to you and your clinic. They don't know the level of service you're offered. They don't know how good you have been for their relative. All they see is the bill. And then they pick up a fuss because that bill is in conflict with what they thought it was going to cost them. Yeah, because they haven't engaged in any of the paperwork that's been sent in advance of the blog posts or the discussions about it with the patient themselves, to the point that these people have so much power, not just in negative reviews, but a few years ago, I had a husband report me to our regulatory body on the basis that I was financially abusing, taking advantage of old women like his wife.
Right.
That was his pretense. She wanted the care. She chose the care. She's an adult. That was what she elected to have, but he was the bill payer. And so they have it's difficult because you can't engage with them. You're not allowed to engage with them because it's a confidentiality thing. You have to engage with the patient.
Yeah.
So I find those situations quite difficult because they've just never engaged on that patient journey, yet they hold such power over us as part of our processes with the patients.
No, geez, you covered a lot in 15 minutes. It's the good thing about whenever I have you on the podcast, Jonathan, it's easy to just ask you a question. I could walk away, go make a coffee, come back, and I know you're going to keep the conversation going. No, but it's good. I want to thank you for coming on, sharing your opinion on good, bad, and difficult, and everything sort of in between, which is what I'm getting from everybody so far. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
So I thought now would be a perfect time to just dive in and remind everybody that if you're looking or considering a podiatry business coach, before you reach out to some of the larger coaching companies, please go to my website, tysonfranklin.com, and read through the coaching section. You'll see I've got a model there called the Thriving Podiatry Business Model. And after you read through everything, there's also a link to my online calendar. From there, we can organize a 30-minute Zoom call. We'll have a bit of a talk. I'll explain the Thriving Podiatry Business Model in a bit more detail. And you may find just after that call, that is all you need just to give yourself a little bit of guidance. But if you want to take it further, I can give you more information. So please go to my website, tysonfranklin.com, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Okay, let's get back to the interview. Okay, with me now is a good friend, Richard Chasen, down in Melbourne. He owns a clinic called the Lower Limb Clinic. So Richard, how are you doing today?
Yeah, not too bad. How about yourself?
I'm great, and thank you for coming on here to talk about this subject of good, bad, and difficult patients. And as I've said with everybody else I've spoken to, there is no right or wrong. It's just your opinion and how you feel about it. So, what's your thinking on this particular subject?
I was thinking about it before, and I had trouble deciding who fell into like the difficult versus the bad. The good's actually quite easy
Oh, yeah.
because good. The older and grouchier I get, the more I think about who I want to spend my time with, who I want to actually work with. And good patients to me are the kind where they come in and they're happy to be here. You're happy to see them. You always have good conversations. They don't quibble about money and bills and that. They know that you have the best interest at heart, and they'll listen to your advice and they'll refer other people. And they don't even have to be evangelists for you. They just add to your day. Like you see them in the
Mm,
diary and go, oh yeah, that'll be good.
yeah,
And I find that bad patients are probably the exact opposite. They're like an energy drain. Like people come in and it doesn't really matter what's happening to them. It'll be a complaint. It may not even be about you. It certainly may not even be something you caused, but it'll just be their foot still hurts. Well, oh, I just met you. But the kind of people who come in and they present you with a list of people they've seen, and you go, okay, so I'm going to be number 5 on this list. But I think just the ones that just don't want to be there and it's somehow your fault.
yeah,
So I guess down to it's almost like the aftertaste of a meal. It's like how you're going to feel by the end of that consult. And with good patients, like I mean, I've got people who I look forward to them coming in because I know we're going to have a great conversation. It's like I look forward to catching up with you. The and at the same time, you get people who they come in and whatever it is, it's a moan, and they're totally oblivious to how late they are for the appointment, but they still want to be seen and
yeah.
all that kind of stuff. Um,
I,
difficult
I, I
patient.
like, if I
Yeah,
just go back a step, it's
yeah,
what you said right at the beginning, I thought was really interesting when you said it's how you feel when you're spending time with them. And I
yeah,
just when you said that, the first thing that popped into my head was it's no different to like your friend circle or people,
yeah,
your acquaintance circle. There's certain people, whenever you're with them, you always feel good for the experience. Likewise, like whenever I'm
yeah.
talking to you, and I've got a group of friends like that, that whenever I talk to them, I always feel good for it.
Mm,
Then I've got some other friends that they're difficult, they're hard work. Like
yeah,
I limit my time with them. I still like them and I'm still friends with them and I do anything for them, but I sometimes find them difficult and a little bit needy. And
yeah,
then you have other people that acquaintances that you meet them and you're like, oh, if I never met them again, I
yeah.
would be fine with that.
It's exactly like friends because some people will come in and they're positive and they're engaged. And I occasionally feel bad afterwards. I'm going, geez, all they did was we talked about me. I didn't really get to talk to them about them. And I feel like I've let the side down. But I want to differentiate also. Um, it's I deal with people in pain. That's most of my work. And
Yeah.
so I'm not talking about I'm not talking about somebody who comes in and something terrible has happened and they're crying or they're in pain or whatever. That's not a bad patient. That's just a patient. That's what we do. What I mean, and you may feel emotionally disturbed by it, upset by, you may feel for them. It's a difficult thing, and we have a certain amount of restraint we have to show so we can treat the people. I mean, nobody wants to give somebody an injection because it hurts, but you know they need it more than you know that it's going to be a temporary pain, so you give them the injection. So at the same time, like that's not what I mean when I talk about difficult patients or bad patients. Those are just patients, and they can be very good patients where they're having a difficult thing that you're helping them through. I'm talking more just about the kind of people who come in and I mean, difficult patients is actually easier when I think about it because the difficult patients are the ones who take you to places that you actually don't really feel you should be. Like, the kind of person who says, and I know that this has happened to you because it's happened to everyone, where they come in and they go, look, I don't really have insurance, but my son does. Where, okay. And then just to make
I,
matters even more
yeah.
interesting, they'll
It's
do
happened
it
to everybody.
yeah, and they do it at reception in front of a room full of people and being like, I could actually say to you, no, that's insurance fraud in private, but you're doing this over here. And just say, look, no, sorry, we can't do that. But my optometrist does. That's very nice, but we can't do that.
Mm,
Like,
I've had that. I've had that where
yeah,
podiatrists have come in and said, "Oh, but I've been seeing such and such, and I know who they are,
yeah, yeah,
and they do this for me all the time." And I'm like, "Yeah, well, what they're doing is wrong. They
yeah.
shouldn't be doing that."
Oh, we used to have a business down the road that had gotten hold of a high caps machine, and they would just like they would churn through podiatrists, but the business kept the machine. And it wasn't a podiatry practice, but it was like marketed as one.
Yeah.
I'm not going to name it on here, but like you get people, and then some people would come to us expecting this for free and that for free. I'm going, no, we've never done that. We will give you the best service you can get. We will, or at least as good as anyone else. We will give you quality treatment, quality devices, whatever it is we're doing for you. But there is a fee for that. I mean, at the same time, we charge based on what we charge. We don't charge based on what it costs us and what you think it should be and all those kinds of things. This is all we do.
Yeah.
So, the people, like I had an email yesterday from somebody, I don't know the person, but I do know of them because they post pretty much their entire lives on social media to a bunch of groups I happen to be in. And the person's saying, I want to come and see, I don't know, but immediate first name thing through the contact us page saying, oh, I want to know, I have this, and the doctor says I have that. I'm thinking I should see an orthopedic surgeon or a rheumatologist. I only want to see you if you're certain you can help me. What do you think? I'm going, I think you need a consult, and I think it's probably not going to be with me. But
I can refer someone in your area.
yeah, like I don't know that I'm the sort of person that you want, because I don't know that I want to be in the crosshairs of somebody who's going to then say what experience they had if they're not happy with the fact I want to charge them for my opinion.
So
So
it's
that
interesting. It's interesting what you say there, though, when you're talking about where they're trying to insist on getting discounts, fraudulently using health fund
yeah,
cards, and that type of thing. That's a different aspect. They're like
yeah.
sneaky patients.
Yeah, but there's another one in the bad/difficult, and it's hard to separate into categories there, but our culture at the moment is in a really good place. We're really working hard on everyone enjoying being at work. We're trying to put our values onto what everyone does, and we're very careful about how people are. So an element of that is protecting one another.
Yeah.
So I occasionally have people, and I discover afterwards that they've been polite to me and absolutely gone off at my staff about something. And I'll ring the person and I'll say, look, I'm sorry, but we don't actually put up with that here. I think you should find somewhere else. Actually, before I get to say that, usually they go off at me then as well, and so I don't really need the the closure of telling them where to go because they've gone. But in general, the people who will say one thing to me, one thing to my colleague, or something to me about my colleague, or vice versa, they surely they must know that in a business which has only got a couple of consulting rooms, we're going to know each other. We're going to speak to
Yeah.
each other. I say, and the way I explain to them is, I have a duty to my staff to give them a safe and reasonably pleasant working environment. And if I'm the problem, they have a responsibility to tell me that I'm the problem. And I let them know that from day one. And they're pretty good at that, but I try not to be the problem. But like patients who will come in and they'll be seeing 4 or 5 people and they won't tell any of the others about who the others are. And then suddenly you get ambushed by the fact that the MRI that someone else ordered showed this, and okay, didn't know you were seeing them. That's difficult because how are you supposed to help them if you don't know what else is going on?
Sometimes patients don't share all the information that they should.
Mm.
Because in their head, they're thinking, oh, you're just a podiatrist and you're just looking at my feet. You don't need to know what else is actually going on.
Yeah.
So they tend to hold back information.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. The communication part right at the beginning is making them understand this is our specialty area, but we need to know everything.
We used to talk about a lot back in the days when I was more involved in surgical things. And the people that we had problems with were ones that didn't tell us that they were on a contraceptive pill or they smoked or whatever else. And you find that out afterwards when they get a clot. And things that would have allowed precautions to be taken didn't happen because they weren't otherwise in the realm where they needed those particular precautions, except for that piece of information that actively withheld. But I mean, look, that's getting quite complex. I think when it came onto this, it was more really it gets back down to who do we want to spend our time with. And
Yeah.
I think more than anything, instead of just marketing a unique selling point and looking for our ideal avatar and all those kind of terms that we throw around, I think too little time is spent saying, well, what kind of people do I want to have coming in here? I mean, there's a lot of people in pain. There's a lot of people with foot pain. There's a lot of people who need help. And what we do, how do I find those people? Because actually getting the kind of patients you want is quite tricky. It's like you can't just say like middle-aged person, like heel pain, enjoys conversation. It doesn't work that way. That's dating. But but I think more than anything, I guess there is the knock-on effect of people who are good patients, people who are the kind that you enjoy spending your time with. as the relationship builds, because it is a relationship, they're more likely to, if not actually actively evangelize for you, they're more likely to refer a friend. And if they're a friend of theirs, the chances are they're quite similar, in which case you will start building that, and gradually you'll spend more and more of your time with the good patients. And to the extent whereby when somebody hurts themselves and goes off to see the physio, and go, but you're here every couple of months, why don't you come here? I go, I didn't think of that. And one day we'll change the I didn't think of that, and then we'll get that aspect as well. So I guess the good patients would be the ones that let you into their lives, partake of yours. Like I remember when we had a bereavement in my family, and there were patients that came to visit. There are patients who I've been to patients' weddings, I've been to patients' funerals. The ones where you're involved with them, and where it's more than just a transactional thing. I guess that would be the good patients. The bad patients, there's too many examples to think of now.
No, but that's the thing.
What
When I do the reboot, one of the things I talk about is the difference between a podiatrist, the podiatrist, and my podiatrist.
Interesting.
And it's
Like Chris Voss talks about, like getting from like you're right to that's right.
yeah, it's along those lines, because if you have a really good relationship with your patients, they will say, oh, when somebody asks them, can you recommend a podiatrist? They go, oh, my podiatrist is Richard. Instead of them saying, oh, I saw a podiatrist at the lower limb clinic. Or they'll say, I saw the podiatrist. And it's the difference between being transactional and really being like having an emotional connection with them.
It's interesting. Yeah, I agree with you. And what always amazes me is the ones who can't remember names of people, and not just podiatrists, but I mean, like somebody will do a hip replacement on them, and it'll be 9 months ago, and they can't remember who it was in the private system. I'm going, this person's cut you up while you were unconscious and repaired
the patient can't remember the doctor's name.
Yeah,
oh.
yeah. The doctor not remembering the patient's name. I mean, like when
you can accept that.
Several thousand patients later, you can accept that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like when they don't remember who they saw, I'm going, that's a pretty big thing. I mean, like I can understand if you don't remember who cut your hair in the 90s, but like
and that is the emotional connection that you actually have with your patients. Because I know people that have seen certain surgeons, and one, they know the name of the surgeon, and they talk about them highly, and they'll actually tell you something about them outside of what they do as surgery. Oh, did you know that their handicap in golf is 3? They just know that little bit, and they're the surgeons that people would say, oh, my surgeon is this. It's because they've taken it that little bit further. So, Richard, I've got to wrap up now. But
Absolutely.
Before I finish, I want to thank you for sending me that book, Unreasonable Hospitality. I've been shooting a number of videos based on stuff that I've read in that book, and I've taken bits and pieces of it and how that applies to podiatry, and doing all these short videos on YouTube. And what a great book. It is a fantastic book. I recommend everyone gets a copy of it.
I do too. Thanks very much for having me on again.
No, this has been fantastic. So thanks for coming on. See ya.
Yeah.
Okay, with me now is Liam McManus. Liam in Southwest Podiatry in Berkshire and in London. And he is a member of Council of the Royal College of Podiatry. So Liam, thank you for coming along and sharing your thoughts on good, bad and difficult patients.
Thanks for having me.
So what's your take on this particular subject?
Good, bad and difficult. I'm probably going to throw you a bit of a curveball today.
Love curveballs. Yep.
Okay. Mate, I don't necessarily think there's a good, bad and difficult. It might be controversial, but there are just different degrees of challenging to me.
Okay.
And there's a little bit challenging, there's moderate degree of challenging, and then there's very challenging. And it all comes down to ourselves as clinicians, not as the actual patient walking through the door. So I kind of want to take you down a bit of a journey today on personality profiling. Have you looked at personality profiling before?
Yes. Yeah, I find it really interesting.
Mate, see, I find it super interesting. And people think when you look at personality profiling, and I'm going to bring in today DISC, which is DISC. So it's kind of classifying people as 4 different colours. So you've got red, yellow, green and blue. But, we're not actually classifying people. When we actually look at the crux of personality profiling, you're physically just making an assessment based on how to improve your communication to make sure that you're obviously communicating in an effective way to your patient, if that makes sense.
I totally understand. I have read a lot about the DISC test. I have had it done on me multiple times. And it's interesting when you talk about the communication thing. It is, if you can understand the personality or personality traits of the patient that's sitting in front of you, and you can adapt your communication skills to that person, then it's a huge benefit.
Oh, so 100%. So in essence, within the first 10 to 15 seconds of your consult, you really need to be understanding if your patient in front of you is red dominant, yellow an influencer, green steadiness, or blue compliance. And if you can really start to understand who's in front of you, you can start to effectively communicate with them. So how many times really, Tyson, do we hear this? Oh, this patient lost faith in orthotics. They lost faith in the education we provided for them.
Yeah.
They lost faith in the diabetic foot health education we give them. How many times do we just blame the patient? And actually, can we spin that round and say, well, did you communicate well enough to the patient?
I agree 100%. And I've had people who work with me, and when they may be complaining about a patient, and I've said, is it the patient or is it how you explained it? Like, you might say something, but do they actually understand it?
It's two-way communication, isn't it? So
Yeah.
whatever you say, the patient has to interpret, they have to understand, they have to reflect on that, and they have to then provide an action forward. So just to kind of go into if people haven't looked at the DISC and the personality profiling. So if you're kind of a dominant person or red, you're kind of driving, competitive, forceful, direct. You try to take over and you interrupt in the consultation. So if that's you as a clinician, then you might not necessarily get on well with somebody who is yellow, for example, who fears rejection and likes to be positive and communicate really well, very friendly, very kind of over enthusiastic, like me, lots of hand movements and telling stories. And then obviously we've got the green and the greeny steadiness, and then blue, which is compliance. So again, looking at these DISC profiles, you start to understand your patient in a slightly different light, really. And as soon as you start to understand your patient, you can tailor your treatment plan. You can tailor your effective communication to speak to them in their terms, their language. And as soon as you can do that, you can see the difference in how that patient is responding to your treatment plan. If you've got a dominant patient in front of you, so a red patient, dominance, high D, they just want A to B. They're going to come to you and say, look, I've got plan to heal pain. What do I need? And as a clinician, if you're very friendly and over enthusiastic, you're not really going to kind of connect with that patient. You're not going to build a rapport as easy as somebody that will actually recognize that dominance and then respond in an A to B fashion. Oh yeah, you need some orthotics. We'll give you some stretches. You might need some 3D gait analysis. And if it doesn't settle, maybe we'll consider some injection therapy or shockwave therapy. Rather than the kind of yellow, more influencer personality, which would be like, oh, how's your mum? How's your dad? Did your dad have plantar fasciitis? How did they get rid of it? This dominant person doesn't want to hear that. And that's really where we start to lose people as patients.
Yeah, and sometimes too, and some of these personality traits, you will notice it when the patient walks in by the way they're dressed. And I've said, if you see someone walk in at 4:30 in the afternoon, they've been at work all day and their shirt looks like they've just ironed it and put it on, they're a detailed person. They like the details. They like the facts. Just give it to them. They don't need bells and whistles and funny stories and your hands waving around and all. It's not who they are. They should teach this at university. This skill should be taught at uni.
Yeah, I was speaking to we take University of Brighton students at Southwest Podiatry in London, and I don't believe that they teach this at the University of Brighton, but certainly the University of Southampton do touch upon this in one of the kind of modules, but they absolutely should. So we go through 3D gait analysis, or we've run 3D technology, and you've got to really understand your patient's personality to kind of move forward with how you're going to interpret that data so that they understand it. And if they don't understand it, they then don't see value in it. And if they don't see value in it, guess what? They become a problem patient. But they're not a problem patient, Tyson. You're the problem as a clinician. For me, with the personality profiling, it was a really massive, I suppose, a really big tip that I got many moons ago, 15, 16 years ago. And it completely changed how I delivered care, really, and delivered effective communication to patients.
Yeah, it's true, because it's the same thing where you could do your gait analysis. Your computer may pump out some figures, might pump out some pretty pictures, and it might pump out some numbers. There's going to be certain patients, show them the numbers. If you know the personality, you know which ones are going to want the numbers, and you'll have other ones, they don't care about the numbers. Just show me the pretty pictures and the pressure and all the different color changes. They're going to really enjoy that. And yeah, it is. This is a good perspective on this particular subject of what we've been talking about.
So going back to the data and the gait analysis, so your red dominant person just wants to know actually what does it mean? The yellow person might want a little bit more kind of belly rubbing around it, and actually, you've got a little bit of pelvic obliquity going on here that's excessive, but it's okay, don't worry about it. We'll support you all the way through. And your blue one likes numbers. So this is your mathematician that wants to really get into the numbers and get into what this means. So you might be talking about 2 standard deviations away from normative range and things like that. So yeah, really super interesting. But, just to bring it back to the patient being good, bad, and difficult, again, every patient is challenging when they walk through the door. And it's understanding how you as a clinician, how we interpret what's going on and how we effectively communicate with that patient will ultimately determine if they get better, if they like you or not.
No, I agree. And like I said, if anyone's interested in, where did you find out your information about DISC? Because I saw it the first time, it must have been, wasn't called DISC the first time I saw personality profile. There's a lady by the name of Florence Lithauer. She did a presentation down in Brisbane 33 years ago that I went to. And that's the first time I heard something like this. Then I got a copy of her book, read her book, and I've seen it bits and pieces over time. But it's a really good reminder because this particular subject we haven't spoken about on the podcast, so not when it comes to dealing with patients.
Yeah. So there's actually quite a number of personality profiling kind of training out there.
Yeah.
This DISC profiling, you're looking at maybe £8,000 to £10,000 just to take you through some training for it. But ultimately, I suppose if you can go online, Google DISC, so it's DISC training, you will get, I suppose, a number of documents, a number of videos to explain it in basic detail, really. And really, as a clinician, you just need to be self-aware, don't we? That we can't just have a one-size-fits-all model of healthcare to all patients because they come from diverse backgrounds.
Yeah, and that's why I think sometimes too, it's when you might have your front desk people might make a comment about a patient and you're going, but I don't see that. And sometimes it could be the personality of your reception on how they deal with the patient to how you deal with the patient as a practitioner in the room. So it is that combination of personalities. I think that is a really good point. I'm glad you actually brought that up because it's an avenue people can go and do some more research on, because you can read as much stuff on this as you want and it can't harm you. It will only make you a better podiatrist because you'll have better communication.
It absolutely does, Tyson. I'll just give you an example as well of multiple examples, but one clear example that just comes to mind is I do a lot in the kind of medical legal world. So I have solicitors that write to me in terms of second and third opinion orthotics, where people have unfortunately been sued and they need a solicitor report. And I have one individual patient basically who got better 100% through orthoses, but it caused a sub-fifth metatarsal bursitis. And basically, because the clinician and the patient never had a really good rapport, because they never really identified the triggers around it and just didn't get on because they didn't connect emotionally as well, they had 2 very contrasting, let's say, personalities. One was a high D and the other one was very fluffy and very friendly. And this patient just wanted a little bit of a hand around her, and she was the kind of friendly one, she was the fluffy one, and she just needed an arm around her shoulder to say, like, look, orthotics are probably going to cause a little bit of irritation, but we can change them, we can modify them. But the clinician in this instance just said, like a dominant person, A to B, no, they will definitely not cause that, not a problem, and crack on, basically. So obviously that doesn't bode well for the patient or the clinician. And obviously it transpired that she was opening up some court cases against multiple people for not managing that very well. So again, just bring it back to, during the initial consultation, have a look at this DISC, have a look at the personality profile of the person in front of you, and start to adapt your own consultation. Because this patient who ultimately sued the podiatrist wasn't a bad or difficult patient. She had failed treatment, she had failed care. and she had failed care because of the rapport that the podiatrist didn't build up.
I remember a lawyer talking at a podiatry conference many years ago, and they said something like 80% of cases that end up going to court or a podiatrist being sued could have been avoided if the lines of communication had opened up earlier, not just totally shut down and thinking, oh, they're a bad patient, or oh, they're being a pain in the ass. If they just opened up the lines of communication and chatted to find out what the actual problem was, 80% of legal cases could be avoided. But they said
100%.
it doesn't happen. So Liam, I want to thank you for coming on here, opening up this can of worms about personality stuff. I'm going to get you back on to do a full episode with you by yourself, because I want to learn a little bit more about who Liam McManus is, because you sound like an interesting fellow. This is the first time we've met.
It certainly is.
Yeah,
Hopefully not the last time.
No, it won't be. Like I said, I'm going to get you back on here. So Liam, thank you very much, and I look forward to talking again soon. Okay, with me now is an old friend. It is Bronwyn Cooper, and she owns Dr. Foot Solutions in Sydney. So Bronwyn, how are you doing today?
Hi, Tyson. Very well. How are you?
I'm great, and thank you for coming on here to share your thoughts on good, bad, and difficult patients. So I'm just going to hand it over to you, and what have you got to say on this subject?
Well, interesting. I guess my thoughts relate to my now 50 years in practice. So obviously in that time, I've seen a fair load of patients across a whole lot of different treatment modalities and in different clinical environments, everything from when I flew out to remote areas like Burke and Cobar for the day in a Department of Health chartered plane, etc., to running a busy multidisciplinary practice in the CBD. And that was way before the days of COVID. So time pressures were an issue there for patients. And we did have some patients in those days who were not good at keeping appointment times themselves, or indeed cancelling in advance. Firstly, I'd say that I'm not practicing full-time. I don't run a full-time appointment book with back-to-back appointments all day the way some people would do. I also largely run 45-minute appointments for repeat and new patients, unless they're for a repeat laser or dressings I don't have to do a lot of because of the nature of the practice I've got. So you can see that actually it's much easier to have a better day at work if you've got longer appointments.
Oh, definitely.
You're devoting more time to the patient, you can develop more empathy with them. And because I see a lot of people with chronic pain since I've had laser, I would say I would have to classify most of my patients in the good category, to be honest.
No, that's good. And I think that's a really important point you make there, though, that the difference between when you allow more time,
yes,
and you get to talk and get to know the patients more, compared to when you are back to back with patients from 8:30 to 5:30 through the whole day and you're zipping between rooms, it's a different mindset.
Oh, absolutely. And then if you're a business owner, you've got the things to deal with, even if you've got your staff, they're juggling in between appointments and so on, if there's something you've urgently got to attend to. So, yeah, I had to really reflect on this, thinking, well, what would I define as a bad or a difficult patient? But I've come up with a number of things because I know I've done a lot of practice management and business management courses over the years, and there are definitions of like 5-star patients at least who are people that are in refer to you. I noticed recently in one of the online groups, a few people put in about seeing 4 generations of patients now and feeling like they're quite old as a result. And I've got the privilege of doing that as well. I have the sort of relationship where some of those people naturally have my mobile phone number and they don't abuse it. And that's not a problem. And I personally find it's much easier in this day and age to triage some problems in advance. Like I've been shut between Christmas and New Year, and we've had requests coming in, and I find it easier just to look at those every few days. And if it's business days and I've been away and out of town, I've looked at it and referred it on. And if it was someone with a kid with an ingrained toenail, I just said, we'll send through a photo so I can better advise you on what to do. And frankly, a raging ingrained toenail is not the sort of patient I want to see. So they're not a bad patient. It's just that's not the sort of bag that I really get off on anymore.
What you're saying is if a patient came in and it was like a difficult problem or a difficult case, some podiatrists should refer them on to someone that may have more of an interest in that area or more expertise in that area?
Oh, yeah, definitely, because you can't know everything as a clinician. And sadly, it's like probably I've got to develop a handout and give to them so they can use that for those people who want to refer on.
So it's like the education beforehand is really
Yes,
important with certain
yes,
patients. The more they're educated and understand what you're going to do, the more compliant they are with the treatment when you offer it
yes,
to them and the plan that you put in place.
yes, for the cast,
So over your 50 years, have you
Yes.
had any particular patients where you've sort of just gone, I'm trying to help them, but they can't be helped, they won't listen, and you've let them, you've actually said, I don't want to treat you anymore as a patient, or that's never happened over the 50 years?
I've had to discharge very few. Oh, there was one guy, and oh God, it was the first year I had the practice in the CBD, so it was in the 80s. And he sort of tried to come on sexually. He's an older guy, and I think all the girls have got stories like that. And I just managed to make sure that we flicked him off somewhere else, and I let the GP know, and they usually understand, etc., because he had a bit of a drinking problem.
I did have somebody tell me that just recently, that they refused to see a patient anymore because when they came in, they made sexual advances towards a female podiatrist.
Yes, and that yeah, definitely shouldn't happen, and people don't have to put up with that.
Have you had any patients that, like over your 50 years, that have scared you in any way, that have ever come in that you've felt intimidated or threatened
Well, it
or
was
scared or
that
anything like
scam
that?
artist who was a professional jockey who was a total sleazebag, and it was in the days when I was still in the MLC Medical Centre, and I left there in '94, and I was working late at night, and not well, so late at night. It was like after 6 o'clock, but it was winter, it was dark, nobody else was there, and I was ringing some people about outstanding accounts. And when I rang him, he did scare me because he threatened to come around and fix me right up, or whatever the saying was. He left me in no doubt after I hung up the phone that it wouldn't be a good idea to stay at work for very long. And in fact, I rang the security at the MLC Centre, and they came up and escorted me out of the building. So that is probably the only time I've been scared, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point too, because even when I mentioned the subject, good, bad, difficult, or just bad and difficult, when I did that episode, is over your career, occasionally you will get a patient who can sort of be intimidating in some way. And I don't think we should have to put up with that.
No, you absolutely should always feel comfortable with somebody. I do remember a woman who was a total pain in the ass, and she would turn up in a busy day when I worked at 30-minute appointments in those days. She would turn up anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes late, at least every second time. And instead of getting up, and I called her in and apologising, Bronwyn, I'm so sorry, and that was it, I don't want to hear an excuse. She would not say, I'm sorry. She would say, oh, the 4:33 bus or the whatever didn't turn up and there's something. And that happened every single time. Oh, and there was another one who was a restaurateur in the CBD of a market restaurant. And in the end, I discharged both of those patients. I basically told it would be in her best interest to find another practice and go to them for her care. And I did it face to face with her. Now, interestingly, her son at the time, or stepson, was the chairman of Sydney Stock Exchange. We're talking people that it was to do with her attitude. That was never going to change. You know what I mean? She would always have turned up late like
No,
that.
but I remember my brother, he's a dentist, and there was a patient that he had that there was a problem with the bill, the same thing. He called the clinic, threatened them, and my brother just went, well, everything was explained beforehand. And then he left his building, he left his clinic that night, and the guy was in the car park waiting for him and hit him over the head with a pipe.
Oh, my God.
And fortunately, other people were there, and they sort of pulled it all up. Police ended up coming. I think the guy got arrested or whatever.
Well, that's a terrible story.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. They say I would put that patient as a bad patient.
Oh, God, yes.
Yeah, that you sort of
bad person.
Yeah. So, and that's what I mean when I class a bad patient. Not every bad patient's a bad person, but some bad people can be bad people and also bad patients.
Yes, and that's the challenge, I think. You're absolutely right. See, for me, in summary, working from home as I've done since 2009 has also changed things somewhat, as has everything. Well, I was going to say post the pandemic, but really I should say post the pandemic shutdown, because as you know, COVID's still everywhere at the moment anyway, because a lot of people are way more flexible, they're way more understanding. A lot of them, I check in on their mental health and how they're doing, because I'm very strong about mental health first aid. And indeed, I reached out to a patient of mine that I haven't seen for only 2 years on the weekend, and she got back to me in an email. She's just literally arrived back that day, so she found my email from an overseas trip. But she told me her husband died at the beginning of last year, and a few months later she tried to take her own life. Now, I know she suffers with depression, but that's not why I got in touch. I've been following up with a few patients I haven't seen for a while. And so really, if you've been in practice for quite a while and you have those sort of relationships with people, you kind of know who those people are that you want to check in on. So one of the first things I always say to people, if they're asking me how I am, and I'll just say, yeah, I'm fine or something, and I'll mention one or two things, but then I'll always look at them carefully and say, and how are you?
Yeah, good point.
Before we get stuck into their feet. And look, I've just got a patient who's coming in about 5 minutes, but I'm using this as an example of probably a good patient, because I've pulled up her financial record. It looks like her patient record we've trashed, because it looks like she's only had one appointment in 2015, and she rang up to say she thinks she's got some nail issues going on that could be fungus. So she fundamentally has good feet most of the time, and yet she's had 6 separate financial transactions where she's bought repeat preforms of this neuromuscular type I use and footwear and some other retail product direct from our front desk, etc. If someone was in a health fund, they would have to book a review appointment with me to be able to claim on that orthotic treatment. So these sort of people are really good patients in the sense that if you fix them up well enough, they don't particularly have to come back. So you need them to replace themselves for you with referrals, though, of course, you see. So I just thought I'd throw that one in. It'll be interesting to see when I see her today, and I haven't seen her feet since 2015. And you might think, well, surely that's a bad patient, but she's a good customer of the business, shall we say.
Yeah, you don't have to,
That
you can have a good patient who doesn't turn up every year. They can still be good patients.
Well, the aim of the business surely is to
Yeah.
get people fixed up so they don't have to keep coming back. That's the whole point.
That would be, that's it. Okay, Brian, I want to thank you for your time today and for sharing a bit of your knowledge over the last 50 years. That's half a century. That is a long time that you've been seeing patients. So there's a bit of wisdom there.
And you'd know that I still am passionate about what I do and love it. I've turned the corner from being a bit pissed off about business problems and other things and having to reinvent marketing and all of that sort of thing. But I'm hoping by my contribution today that some younger graduates who are stuck in a bit of a grind of very short appointments with a lot of patients that they feel don't particularly value their services might realise that there is a way that you can intervene and ultimately control that. But it might come from a little bit more experience or whatever. But hey, all of we people being interviewed like yourself are always open to people reaching out. So let's hope this is helpful to somebody.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you, Tyson.
Well, there you have it. That is the end of this particular episode and part 2, group perspective on good, bad and difficult patients. And I like how the 8 guests I had, some were similar in their thinking and some were completely different, which I thought is absolutely fantastic. And after you've listened to this, your perspective on good, bad and difficult may have changed. It may be exactly the same. I know some of my thinking has changed in some areas, but other areas have not changed at all. And that's okay. We're all different. That's fine to have your own opinion on what you think good, bad and difficult it is, and everything in between. Now, before I finish up, just to remind people, if you're in Australia, I have more live reboots coming up this year. I've actually had one in July in Cairns. So if you go to my website, tysonfranklin.com, you can check out all the information there. And I tell you, the 2-day live podiatry business reboot is an amazing event. So if you're in Australia, you're free in July and you want to come to the tropics at the best time of the year, please go to my website, tysonfranklin.com, click on events and you'll get all the information. And one final thing, if you're enjoying this podcast, please tell your podiatry friends. And if you really enjoy it, I would love for you to give us a rating and review on whatever podcast platform you happen to be listening to. So that's it for me this week. I want you to look after yourself, look after your family, and I will talk to you again next week. Bye for now.